So I'm never the type of person in general who does anything for its own sake. Like, I don't do things just to shock people or just to annoy people. It's not really, not like saying I'm so virtuous. It's just not my temperament. I'm actually not a disruptor, meaning I don't like conflict, and I have a really long history of avoiding it, which can be really actually a bad thing and an unvirtuous thing to do. So I actually struggle with being vocal and speaking up for myself in every way except for like in music and on social media, because I think it's so much easier to feel a little farther away from what I perceive as the dangers of being controversial or of stirring up conflict or whatever. So all that to say, when I talk about or sing about things that might raise some eyebrows or whatever, it's because those are the things that I feel the most deeply passionate about saying. I'm saying them and I'm singing them because I feel that they're healing notions. So for example, I got a lot of interesting reaction. I knew I would, to the song Deliverer, which was our first single. And it says things like, "You are not possessive, you respect all things." That line alone, I think I got more negative feedback about than anything I've ever sung in my entire career. I had actually taken it from a passage in a journal entry from Thomas Merton, who talks about how God, who is love, so who embodies everything that love is, who is only moved by love and who only moves with love, does not exhibit any of the disordered attachments that we might when we love someone. And so when I say God is not possessive, I don't mean that he doesn't own anything. I mean, he does not treat what he made as if he owns it. And I think that is a really healing notion for someone who grew up with an idea of, basically my idea of God as a kid sounded a lot more like an alcoholic dad or an abusive husband than it did like the lover of my soul. So I wrote that because I needed that. I wrote that because those are the ideas that are healing me, and I don't know what else to write about. I've been really moved by the work of Brené Brown the last few years. Recently, my husband recommended a book of hers I hadn't read, which is called Braving the Wilderness. Her work on vulnerability and shame has been transformational for me as a person and as an artist, because those two things are very, very much wrapped up in being an artist and creating, being vulnerable, learning not to be ruled by shame. So Brené Brown's a huge influence on me. My sort of literary companions on this whole journey have been Thomas Merton, Henry Nouwen, Madeleine L'Engle, who I've read, her fiction, but also her nonfiction is really amazing. And I named Irrational Season, track 8, after her memoir called Irrational Season. And also Julian of Norwich, who is an English mystic from Middle Ages, late Middle Ages. She was the first published English woman. And she writes a lot about things like God as mother, which would sound like such a modern progressive idea, but actually there have been people writing about that concept for many, many, many centuries now. And she's been really an influence on me as well. And then as far as music, I'm a huge fan of an artist named Agnes Obel, who is she's from Denmark, and she's a neoclassical singer-songwriter. I really love this Swedish artist named Frida Sundemo, who writes kind of like, it's EDM music, but it's got a poetic approach lyrically, which I really love, because a lot of EDM music is kind of, I think, lyrically, this is not the focus. So I love that sort of combination of that dream pop sound with poetry. So she's a favorite. My evolution has necessarily involved broadening, because I was brought up in sort of a very narrow fundamentalist mindset, and my evolution into Catholicism was actually an evolution out of that into an idea that, Christianity is really broad. You can be a Catholic and you can be someone who leans more towards the predestination idea. You can be a Catholic and you can lean way far away from that. And you sort of can swim in this wide river rather than being like, this is the only way to be a Christian. So my becoming Catholic had a lot to do with leaving behind that kind of narrow mind and trying to open my mind. even though some people would look at Catholicism and say it's narrow-minded, I know, but for me it was a huge broadening. And then I think in my work, traveling and singing and writing with people of all different stripes, and Christian and non-Christian. I wrote a song on my first record called Breaking Through with a non-practicing Jewish man, and it was a really beautiful experience for me. I think my work and the places it takes me in that regard has also been just instrumental in making, helping me to live with open hands and around truth. Not to say that truth doesn't matter, but to say that I know I will never fit all of the truth inside my head. The best I can do is try to float, in the ocean of truth. And I'm kind of borrowing that from Chesterton, who said in Orthodoxy that he said the logician is the one who tries to fit God into his head, and the poet, who everyone else calls a madman, is actually the one who learns how to float in the ocean that is God. And it's not his head that splits in the end from going mad. It's actually the logician. So I think both my religious evolution and my work itself have kind of led me on a journey of broadening, expanding.